site. But what they are requesting and what the Planning Commission does have the authority to allow is for a deferral of that additional 27 parking spaces, so long as the applicant can demonstrate that the parking spaces could be accommodated if and when they're deemed necessary. But the intent here is that we as a township don't necessarily want to put more impervious surface on the ground than is necessary, so the Planning Commission does have the authority to grant that deferral, and the applicant has formally requested it. And the Planning Department, in reviewing it, thinks that it's an appropriate request and is recommending that the Planning Commission grant that deferral on the additional parking. One of the conditions for approval that the Planning Department is recommending is the existing dumpster on the west side of the site, which, help me out, Mr. Mendenhall, is in this area here?
Yeah, just a little north of there.
Currently, it's unscreened, and one of the requirements of the zoning ordinance is the Planning Commission has the authority to require a dumpster be screened. So one of the conditions of approval recommended by the Planning Department is that existing dumpster be placed within an enclosure. In Mr. Mendenhall's response letter that we received yesterday, which I think is dated June 25th, he has indicated that his client would be willing to construct a dumpster enclosure that would be of materials to match the existing and proposed building. My hope is to go through the key points of our review letter rather than hit on every single point, if the Planning Commission will allow me. The existing parking lot is uncurbed, and under current zoning ordinance standards, new commercial parking lots are required to have curb and gutter around the entire perimeter of any new parking lot. The applicant is not proposing to retrofit the existing parking lot to accommodate curb and gutter, and the Planning Commission has the authority to allow for a whole or partial dismissal of that requirement on an existing site. But the Planning Commission does have the authority to determine whether some curbing or some other bumper blocks, some other improvements could be warranted on an existing site as a condition of approval. What the Planning Department is recommending and what the applicant is agreeing to is some new bumper blocks, wheel chocks along this east perimeter of the existing parking lot. The reason we feel this is justified is there's a significant drop-off in elevation from the existing parking down to the US 23 expressway down here, and what no one would want to see is anyone taking their foot off the gas when they pull into park and not putting the car in park and inadvertently driving down that hill and finding themselves in the middle of the expressway. Obviously, we don't want that, so we think having as a condition of approval, requiring the bumper blocks along this perimeter is a reasonable safety request, and we're recommending that, and the applicant has responded that they would be willing to do that. The landscaping, the application does include some improvements to the existing landscaping. It is worth noting that when Coppert, I need to get used to, I've been mispronouncing it for some time, Coppert took over the building, they did on their own improve the existing landscaping on the site. Put in some parking lot islands, put in some new landscaping throughout, added some landscaping stones. If you see the before and after pictures, there really was a significant improvement between what the building looked like prior to Coppert taking over and what it looks like today. And as part of this submittal, the applicant is proposing additional landscaping, which is what is indicated on the plan. So additional trees, additional shrubs throughout the site. They're requesting that they not be held to all of a strict application of the foundation landscaping requirements for the new addition, because they do want to be able to accommodate an additional addition sometime in the near future on the south side of the proposed addition. And so what they don't want to do is have to remove that landscaping if and when that comes, which we all hope is sooner rather than later. The Planning Department has reviewed the landscape architects, both their landscape plan and their supplemental letter that went with it, where they went through what a strict application of the requirements would be and what is existing on the site and what is proposed. And it's the Planning Department's determination and recommendation to the Planning Commission that the proposed landscaping, in addition to what is already there and taking into account what Coppert did when they moved in on their own without being required to do so, that all as a whole package satisfies the intent of the landscaping standards of Section 5.11 of the zoning ordinance. The Planning Commission does have the authority to take into account a number of factors when reviewing landscape plan on an existing site to determine whether it's a reasonable application of the landscaping standards. And we think on this site that the applicant has more than reasonably made an attempt to meet the intent of those standards. The other item notable on our letter is the fact that the addition and the existing building do not meet the township's current building materials and architectural standards. If this building were a new build today, it would be required to meet the building materials and architectural standards for zone. We have various zones in the township, and within each of those zones is certain requirements for building materials. This site in particular would be in Zone 1, which is kind of the highest level of requirements because of its proximity to Old 23 and to US 23. It would be, if it were a new build, be required to be a minimum of 40% brick, and it would have a minimum on the amount of drive-it material and standing seam metal siding, which the existing building does have a lot of those materials, the metal siding, the drive-it, and the proposed addition is going to carry on those same materials in order to match the existing. The zoning ordinance does have a provision that when you are doing an addition to an existing building that is less than 100% in floor area of the building that it's being added to, that the addition can be built with materials consistent with the existing building, and that's essentially what the applicant is proposing in this case. The Planning Commission does have the authority to make a determination that the addition is consistent with the existing building and not to apply a strict application of the building materials and architectural standards to the addition and or to the existing building as a condition of site plan approval. The recommendation of the Planning Department is that the addition does meet the materials and the look of the existing building, and to try to retrofit it to meet the current standards of the 40% brick and so on is likely not a reasonable application of the zoning ordinance. So our recommendation is that the Planning Commission waive the requirements, the building and architectural requirements of Section 5.24 for the proposed addition. I believe that to be the key points of our letter. To sum up, we have, along with the recommendations of the Planning Department, the Fire Marshal, the DPW, and the Township Engineer, we recommend conditional approval of site plan application number 523, subject to 6 conditions that are noted on your letter. Again, the deferral of the parking spaces, the bumper blocks along the east perimeter, the dumpster enclosure. The applicant would be required to purchase an additional 3.64 sewer RUs to accommodate the proposed addition. And both the Township Engineer and the Fire Marshal had some relatively minor items that would need to be addressed on the construction plan submittal. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on any of those points.
I see from the letter submitted by the applicant that they're willing to adhere to those conditions, so
yes,
for everybody's benefit, I think it's been agreed you guys would take care of those issues that we've noticed. So, but I'd like to open up the Planning Commission if there's any questions or comments for either the applicant or the Planning Director.
I have a comment. I went by to look at your site, and I just thought it was really well done, really maintained really well. It was nice to see.
Well, thank you. I'll pass that along.
I did have a question. I was looking through this booklet that somebody put together, and I noticed in one of the pictures that the driveway leading up to the site looked fairly bad. So I went out there and I saw that they did patch it, so they must have taken these pictures before they patched.
Yes.
But going forward, whose responsibility is that to maintain those common drives in there?
Did you want to handle that?
Well, included in their submittal, and we can both take a stab at it, included in their submittal is the existing easement and maintenance agreement for that shared driveway. Now, how that's actually being applied in reality, you may be able to answer that better than I.
I know Copper paid for the repairs 100% on their own and has not, to this date, asked any of the other industrial buildings there to participate. But I believe they're responsible for 40%, or 38% of those repairs. And then the remaining parcels are 14, 22, looks like 26%. But they're of the mindset that they need to, have the drive drivable, and they just went through their busy season right now, so it was imperative that everything was operational.
So even that cul-de-sac area in front of their gate, even though that no other person would drive on that portion unless they're going to Copert, the other people still have to share in the cost.
Correct.
Well, even though they Copert it.
The way I understand this is it's because they have more of the drive that only they are using. They're the ones that are responsible for two-fifths of the maintenance of that drive.
And they're responsible for over 40%, and that's the largest share of any of the others, presumably because they utilize more of it than anyone else.
Well, I would just say that the southwest corner of that round cul-de-sac is showing some pretty good signs of falling apart. There's cracks running through quite a bit of it, and grass is growing up through it. So it's probably not one of the higher traveled portions of that cul-de-sac, because only me turning around in the cul-de-sac is probably the only reason anybody would ever go around on it, but...
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question for Dave, I guess. Is the deferred parking that we looked at, and they're willing to give here, it is in an area that won't be disturbed, and it's lined up so that if the future addition is not going to be changed, correct? So that'll stay there.
Yes.
And is there enough space there to adequately support the deferred parking for any addition?
There is, in
First
fact,
question.
the addition would only require 27 additional spaces. I didn't...
I'm talking about a future addition.
Right. What they're showing for the deferred parking, the maximum number of spaces they could put in, Mr. Menow, I don't know if you know the
61.
number. 61.
Yeah.
So well more than the 27 that they're asking to be deferred. The 27 that would be required as part of this addition. So if you, simple math, if they double this addition to another 18,000 square feet, that would be another 27 spaces, and they are showing that they could accommodate that.
All right. I'm all for not adding impervious soil wherever we can, but I just want to make sure that we can accommodate the future. And the other thing is drainage. Is engineering firm looked at it and said, so we'll support the extra parking if in the future we need it?
Yes.
Okay.
So what is that, what is the actual development of that area going to look like then without parking? Is it going to be, it's not going to be paved, it's going to be
Just
just
Right now, it's just grassy lawn area,
Right.
and it's going to stay that way, other than the 18,000 square feet that they're... Although a lot of the 18,000 square feet that they're going to build upon is currently paved, am I correct?
Right.
So we're actually not removing, or not adding a whole lot of impervious, because they're building onto a paved pad as it is.
And then on the site plan, it says provisional areas for parking, or does it just show it like that? Because I think if we approve it today, the site plan's going to go with the property, if I'm correct, right? So if they sell this building, the site plan, as approved today, remains with the property. And so if the use changes and the parking's required, do we have that captured on site plan for provisional area?
That's what this shows, and what could potentially happen is, if there were to be a change of use on this building, we as a planning department would look at it as part of our zoning compliance process. Part of that is looking at, is this a use that's allowed in that building, in that zoning district, but part of that is parking. So if the new use were to come in and it's determined that, because of the nature of that use, there does need to be additional parking, this would be the trigger to say it is now required. Deferral was granted in 2014, but you could go back and require it.
A couple other questions. The existing building, what's the square footage of that?
39,000?
It's, hold on, 36,000 and,
42,540?
yeah, there you go.
Okay. So I was just concerned that when they talk about adding on 3,600 square feet, but only doing 8, or not 3,600, 36,000, only doing 18 right now, I was wondering if they were trying to just do it in 2 pieces so they didn't have to bring the site into compliance, but by increasing it by 100%. So that was the reason I said. In the Hubbarth and Clark's review letter, I thought they said something about no additional bathrooms or the like were proposed.
I know they say no additional sewer improvements.
So, it does not appear that any new sanitary sewer improvements are included with, now, I don't know what they consider sanitary sewer improvements or not, but, I mean, there is new bathrooms being added.
Yes. So they look at the outside of the building and whether or not there's any new sewer leads proposed, and there is not. The existing sewer leads could accommodate the new locker rooms, the new sinks, the new employee break room.
True, we actually stubbed it for the expansion at the southern wall, so everything's sitting there just ready to be tapped, so we don't have to do anything on site.
Okay. And then the last thing, that south wall that's all metal, it's all metal now, it's proposed to be all metal in this addition, with the thought that it's going to be, that's where the next addition is going to happen. My feeling, I don't know that anybody else shares this, but I just would like to give your people that you're working for, my thought is that when the additions are done, that wall looks like the other sides.
It'll have a wainscot on it on
Right.
the final addition, absolutely.
Okay. That's everything I have.
I just had a quick comment on the building material. I am in favor of leaving the building material match. I feel it'll look better to match the existing material than to force them into new requirements and new standards.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with Keith also. Yeah. Well, then, if there's nothing else, no other comments, then I guess I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve site plan application number 523, Copper Biological Building Addition, subject to the following conditions being adequately addressed on the stamping sets. They are approval of the applicant's deferred parking request, which is taken care of, installation of wheel chocks in the east parking lot, construction of a dumpster enclosure in compliance with section 5.7, purchase of 3.64 additional sewer RUs is required by the DPW director, satisfaction of the conditions outlined in the township engineer's review letter, satisfaction of the conditions outlined in the fire marshal's review letter, and I think we addressed all of them, right? So that's the motion.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Commissioner Voigt and a second from Commissioner Grissom. Is there any other comments or questions?
I would just ask if we could just add the date of those review letters to the motion, which looks like they're all June 9th, just in case there's multiple letters.
Sure.
Okay, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
More bugs.
Good bugs, though.
So next on the agenda is site plan application 54-C for Chestnut Development, Plan Development Conceptual Plan. Applicant Steve Bernau, Chestnut Development, property owner Chestnut Development. So, good forward and let us know who you are. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My name is David LeClaire with Livingston Engineering, and Steve Rona from Chestnut Development is with me tonight to answer any questions as well. We're here tonight for concept plan approval for a small development on about 9 acres of property south side of M59 in Section 29 of the township. If you recall, when Autumn Woods was done several years ago, probably many years ago at this point, this piece was part of the PD zoning. I believe at that time it was anticipated to be a church site. Since that time, whatever plans the church had has fallen through. Mr. Grono has acquired the property and would like to put some single-family homes in. The plan that we have before you is 18 lots serviced off of a single cul-de-sac coming off of M59. These lots are about 18,000 square feet, 80 foot of frontage. They're almost identical in size to the lots in Autumn Woods to the east of here. We did try to arrange the layout of this development so that most of the open space backed up to San Marino. San Marino is a little larger lots, less density. There's a really, really nice wood line along there, so we tried to put most of our open space along that side. One of the things that's really difficult on a small piece like this, getting large chunks of open space, the whole property is only 9 acres, so we do have 25% open space, but it's very difficult to get large chunks of open space for any community-type benefit. But we certainly believe this benefits the site, the people in San Marino that back up to that nice wood line, and it's very consistent with Autumn Woods to the east of there. The site will be serviced by township water. There was 20 REUs assessed to this property back when the PUD was done several years ago. We're actually only using 18 of those. We're also going to connect to the township sewer system. That's pretty much all pertaining to the site. I think there's been some discussion in Mr. Campbell's letter regarding community benefits, some water and sewer issues that we'd like to discuss if need be, and we'd certainly like your opinion to be able to move this project forward. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, as well as Mr. Bruno.
Thank you. I think we'll do that. We'll turn it over to Planning Director Cannell now to go over his review letter.
Thanks again. So the Planning Department's review letter is dated June 16, 2014. There was also a corresponding, some correspondence from the DPW, from the fire marshal, and the township engineer. Not any formal reviews from those groups at this point, this being a conceptual plan. The idea here from a review and approval standpoint is that property is already zoned plan development, and the applicant is at this stage opting to go through the plan development approval process despite the fact that the property already has the plan development zoning on it. So the process would be the same other than the formality of actually rezoning the property to PD zoning district. That process being a conceptual plan, which is why we're here tonight, a preliminary site plan, and a final site plan. All three of those plans would go before the Planning Commission for a recommendation and before the Township Board for final approval. Well, with the exception of a concept plan, no formal action is required on the concept plan, either from the Planning Commission or from the Township Board. What the intent at this stage is to look at kind of a bigger picture and whether or not this is a plan that is a good fit in this location, whether the layout is in the realm of the possible, so that the applicant has the best information he can get from the Planning Commission and the Township Board moving forward. So our review letter is more general in nature than looking at the nitty-gritty, the site plan components of the proposal. That would be something that would happen if and when we get to preliminary site plan. As Mr. Leclerc mentioned, there is 18 lots proposed on this particular property. This property is just a hair under 9 acres, 8.99, which is a density of 2 units per acre. Because this property is master planned public quasi-public, because it was always envisioned to be a church, there is no master plan residential density for this property, but in discussions with the applicant very early on, it was, the direction we saw this going was at maybe a maximum density of what we have now in Autumn Woods, and that's essentially what they have here. Autumn Woods is 80-foot by 150-foot lots, mostly, just over a quarter of an acre, with the same frontage, the same building envelopes. From a layout standpoint, this is nearly identical to the layout of Autumn Woods in terms of how the lots are sized and oriented and how the building envelopes are laid out within each lot. The setbacks for the overall development are consistent with the minimum requirements for a planned development. The one thing we did want to bring to your attention, and we could talk about it more as I move through the letter, but the planned development, in lieu of a more specific design guidelines of a pattern book, does call for a minimum side lot setback between each unit of 15 feet for a total of 30 feet. And what is proposed here is 10-foot setbacks on each side, or a total of 20 feet between the building envelopes of each lot. That is consistent with Autumn Woods, but the Planning Commission and the Township Board would have to be comfortable with having that reduced setback from what is kind of the baseline requirement for planned development. The layout of the concept plan is generally consistent with Autumn Woods, as I mentioned, and also consistent with the development standards if this were a property zone medium-density residential zoning district, despite the fact that it's zone PD. Bear with me here. So, 2 units per acre. As far as the access along M59, so it's just a few hundred feet east of 250 feet east of Cullen Road, where it comes out right here. 620 feet to the east of Clover Ridge Drive, which is the first entrance in the San Marino subdivision, and 930 feet west of the center line of Autumn Glen, which is the main entrance into the Autumn Woods subdivision. MDOT has given this plan a cursory review, and while they do have some concerns with safety and with left turns in and out, and with how those left turns may or may not conflict with left turns from Cullen Road, they do not feel that a center left turn lane along M59 is warranted based on the traffic to be generated by 18 lots. It doesn't meet the strict warrants for that addition. However, they do feel that there would be a significant safety benefit if that were to be provided. They recognize that regardless of where the entrance into the subdivision or into this proposed development would go, there's going to be some potential conflicts. If it were to be moved west, there would be more conflicts with Cullen Road. If it were to be moved east, there would be potentially more conflicts because the proposed entrance wouldn't have the benefit of the existing turning lane on the north side of M59 for the benefit of right turns on the Cullen Road. So the MDOT recognizes that regardless of where this entrance is, there's the potential for conflicts, but they do seem to be in agreement that at the center point of the lot is as good a spot as any. That all being said, they would take a closer look at this if this plan were to move forward. 18 lots, usually the national standard is 10 trips per day per residential lot, so 18 lots would generate 180 trips, 90 trips in, 90 trips out. What we haven't seen yet is any kind of a trip distribution model that would let us know what % of those trips are coming from the east or the west. That would be something that would be required as part of a preliminary site plan. The distance of the road is right at the threshold of where the township draws the line of having a private road that requires a second point of access. If you measure the road from the front setback line, the proposed road from the front setback line to the back of the cul-de-sac, why this is not cooperating. It's approximately 650, 660 feet. And the township's zoning ordinance in its private road standards says that any road over 600 feet should be looked at closely for the opportunities for a second point of access. It's not necessarily a requirement, and the township can make a determination that the second point of access is infeasible, but it would have to be a pretty strong case in that regard. The township also requires that any private road serving 25 lots or more has to have a second point of access. This particular development is proposed to be 18 lots. The road would have to meet the private road standards of Hartland Township for a private road serving 13 to 24 lots, which would be at a minimum a 26-foot pavement width plus curb and gutter. That's what the applicant is proposing. As I mentioned earlier, there is a question of the setbacks between the building envelopes, the side yard setbacks of the building envelopes of each of the proposed lots. That would be something that the township would have to take under consideration, whether or not the proposed setbacks on each lot could be acceptable. Keep in mind that the setbacks that are proposed are consistent with the MDR zoning district. As Mr. Leclerc mentioned, there's 20 water RUs currently assessed to the property. They would be required to use 18 of those for the 18 single-family lots. The township would require that the existing 12-inch water main, which currently stubs at the east property line of the subject property, be brought to and through, which is to say brought all the way across the property and stub off at the west side, in addition to bring it into the development to serve the proposed homes. The recommendation of both the DPW and the township engineer is to also loop the existing water main and connect it through to an existing stub within Autumn Woods. There's operational and safety benefits to having a looped water main system, and both the engineer and the DPW advocate for that and ask that the township consider that as a possible recognizable benefit as a condition of the plan development approval. At this point in the concept plan, the applicant has not provided any design details of the site, in particular what the houses, how they would be designed, the architectural nature of them, the building materials, the garage orientation, the size, to give the Planning Commission a better sense of what sort of homes the developer envisions for this property. That would be something that would be necessary as part of the preliminary plan. Mr. Leclerc also mentioned open space, which we discussed on page 6 of our review letter. The baseline requirement is 25% open space, and this site is 9 acres, and 3.5 of those acres is to remain as common area, and so that is more than 25%. The question is all of that 3.5 acres of common area, does it truly meet the intent of the open space requirements, given that a lot of it is going to be utilized as the detention area, and that it also serves the purpose of meeting setback requirements. So does land that would otherwise be required as setback requirements meet the intent of also applying toward open space? That would be something that the township would have to take under consideration. We've not seen a landscaping plan as part of this concept plan. We would want to see that as part of the preliminary plan. No details have been provided with respect to exterior lighting, whether any street lights are being proposed. As I mentioned, the submittal for the concept plan didn't get into what, if any, recognizable benefits the applicant is offering, but as we've discussed, looping the water main, perhaps connecting the proposed sidewalk. The applicant is proposing a sidewalk along both sides of the cul-de-sac. There may be some benefit to connecting that sidewalk through the common area of Autumn Woods and connecting with the existing sidewalk network within Autumn Woods. Again, the DPW, the township engineer, and the fire marshal did not do a formal review of the concept plan. They would do a formal review of the preliminary plan. The fire marshal, though, in conversations that I've had with him since our review letters went out, again stresses that the 600-foot maximum for a private road exists for a reason, and only having one point of access to this proposed development, and having one point of access serving a private road that is slightly more than 600 feet, is a concern to him from a public safety standpoint. He would ask that the township consider requiring some sort of either a public or an emergency-only connection through the common area of Autumn Woods and making a connection to Autumn Woods. The township does have the opportunity to take that under consideration, but would have to consider whether that's a feasible accommodation to make that happen. And again, finally, the planning department does not have a recommendation at this time. The intent of the conceptual plan review is just to give the applicant an idea of whether this is a plan that is feasible to the extent that it should move forward. I think what would probably benefit both the applicant and the township at this early stage of the concept plan review is if any of these items, such as open space, the provision of a road connection through to Autumn Woods, the types of things that have the potential to squeeze one or more lots from this proposed development, I think the applicant really would benefit from hearing from the township at this stage whether that's something that we're going to take a good look at, because every lot that gets squeezed affects the pro forma of a development like this, and it would be fair for the applicant to know whether that's something that the township's going to want to look at as this plan moves forward. Happy to answer any questions. I recognize I went through that somewhat quickly.
Well, at this point, it's a pretty simple plan. It's just a concept, so, I mean, there's not much to review, but I'd like to open it up to the Planning Commission then for questions and comments.
Dave, can you access like a satellite view of that area?
Oops. So obviously the orange box is the subject property, Autumn Woods to the east, San Marino to the west, Hartland Estates, Kitty Corner, Cullen Road.
Does the proposal run a sidewalk all the way along their frontage on M59?
It does. Which there is one currently at Autumn Woods, so it would be an extension of that sidewalk.
Do you have an idea how you're going to do that with the grade change? Mr. Leclerc?
Yes.
Do you have an idea how you're going to put that sidewalk in, going to the west from your your road, really? I mean, that's where the grade
Yeah, there's a good size
kind of takes off.
elevation change right through here.
Yes, and we have some concern about that. I mean, there is no sidewalk, obviously to the east, there's sidewalk up to this, along Autumn Woods. One of the things that Mr. Ronow had discussed is whether or not we even really need a sidewalk to the west of our entrance. Certainly we want to connect to Autumn Woods to the east. To the west, we've got that bluff there. There is no sidewalk along Autumn Woods, and Autumn Woods contains a pretty significant amount of frontage on M59. So I don't know that there's even really the need for a sidewalk there. One of the things that we did discuss is maybe putting some kind of pedestrian connector through Autumn Woods if they would be so inclined to accept something like that.
Through Autumn Woods?
Yes, if you could window out a little bit. And it was part of Mr. Campbell's review letter.
Through this area?
Yes, there's a pump station down in that area. We think it would probably be a good idea for the people in Autumn Woods and this development if we could put some kind of wood chip trail or something through there, kind of coming down through our lot line here and connecting to the sidewalk so that those two developments could be connected. This would also get the Autumn Woods people, allow them to get up to the sidewalk on M59 if they so choose. And we think that would be a good tangible community benefit.
Well, the township right now has been looking at a whole plan of pathways, and I know there's no sidewalk there, but I do believe that people in San Marino have voiced some opinion to liking to be connected to a sidewalk system. So to just say because there isn't one there now that we don't put one there, I don't know that that's good planning. I do know that it offers some challenges, so.
Yeah, I think eventually there's going to have to be one there, whether it's along the property line or whether it's into the property line a little bit. Eventually, there's going to have to be something connecting to both adjacent properties, because I like Commissioner Hopkins said, we do have a master plan that we're working on for connecting their walkability throughout the township.
Right.
There's a lot of segmented areas that are there right now that we're trying to fix.
Right.
So the idea is to be able to walk from San Marino down to the park system, basically, on
Well, certainly, we do have some open space along the frontage of M59 there.
Right.
So if need be, that sidewalk could be pulled back, because there would be some grading challenges to keep it out,
Yeah.
at the same location that it is for Autumn Woods and where it would be on the east side of this development, certainly.
Maybe there's an opportunity, if you can pan up a little bit, the other way, sorry. Yeah. Maybe there's an opportunity there in the San Marino. I see some where the houses stop on that. Yep, they just go south from there. Keep going south, where the wooded area is there. Might be some connectability opportunities right there.
Through here?
Or just directly through, either a three-way, right, to come down from the proposed property and then connect straight through from Autumn Woods to San Marino. Right in that area. I don't know. It looks like an easement to me. Yeah, right there.
Yes.
Here and then there. So get up to that road. That might be an opportunity. Because the sidewalk doesn't necessarily have to be on 59. Sure. I think we just want the connectability. We want to be able to get people from one area of the township to the next without having to drive.
Yeah. What about the thought of having it be something other than a hard surface sidewalk?
Yeah, I think we'd probably want hard surface, more universal, I guess. People with disabilities and mobility issues.
I certainly think if it's along the M59 frontage, it would need to be a hard surface, multimodal, non-motorized type of surface. If there is anything to be said for extending the sidewalk all the way across their frontage, it's that, that was required when the Autumn Woods development was done. I would guess that the Autumn Woods developer would have liked to have only had to bring the sidewalk as far as the entrance into their development, but, this property now benefits from the fact that Autumn Woods was required to bring it all the way across their frontage, and the same could be said for this property.
Yeah, and I'm not an engineer, but, M59 catches San Marino's road, and it's going to catch yours. I understand there's a big berm in between there, but it seems like you can connect, point A to point B. Maybe it's that you take that berm down.
The berm could be taken down, but we've got, I think there's gas main along there.
Yeah.
There's also at least one, major ITC pole, one of the new steel poles that are there, and those are all concerns about taking that berm down.
But it does look like you say you have room in between the berm and the first lot.
There is some open space there, that's correct.
In between, which would make sense, and actually it might be kind of nice not to have that M59 sound. You'd be a little protected if you're walking with having the berm between you and the road, if that's allowed, on private property. I don't know how that all works.
There would have to be an easement. If it was outside of the public right-of-way, then there would have to be an easement
Right.
for the sidewalk, but that's certainly something that's been done many times before.
Right.
Dave, have you done any calculation with I looked up the percentage of open space or common space in Autumn Woods?
I didn't do the actual calculation. I could go back and look at that.
Seems to me we gave up some more side lot setback because of the extra open space that they offer. And I don't know what percentage it is compared to this?
I could look that up easily enough, not as I sit here right now, but just looking at the site, I mean, there's certainly a large portion of it down here. I assume a lot of this is relatively wet. Some common areas scattered throughout the site.
Right up front, too, towards
Yep.
59.
I would have to look into what that percentage was when it got approved.
Dave, when it comes to traffic generation, what I'm seeing is, would the township be interested in a trip distribution model forecasting the number of peak hour trips in and out of the area?
Yes.
So that's something that we would have looked at.
Yeah, that would be part of an impact assessment for a plan development.
Just the concern is for safety, obviously, right? Is if anyone's ever driven this area at this time of day, the rush hour can be really difficult, right? And if you can pan down a little bit, there's a lot going on here, right? So I think that might be important to do with Cullen Road and, the entrances on either side of M59.
Yeah, we have had an opportunity to talk to the applicant, I remember talking to his realtor when he was still considering this property, talking to MDOT about what would be required on MDOT's end, and then what would the township perhaps require as a recognizable benefit above and beyond that. MDOT did say that, at least based on a cursory review, this wouldn't warrant extending the existing left turn lane all the way that ends at Autumn Woods now, extending it all the way to this development, but there would be a safety benefit to that, and that would fall more in the township's domain. One of the things we talked about is potentially there's an existing right turn taper on the north side of 59, so folks can get over to make the right turn onto Cullen. One of the questions was, could that be extended further east to act as a passing lane? So if someone's waiting to make the left turn into this development, the existing westbound through traffic could use an extension of this passing lane to get around. MDOT's concern with that was you're then asking for some conflicts between the folks who are getting over a little bit later to make to make the right turn onto Cullen, getting sideswiped by the folks that are using it as a passing lane. So I think all agree that there's going to be some challenges with safe access into and out of this site that we're going to have to work together on.
Now then, does that then time into what is the actual distance of the road? Is it 620 to the cul-de-sac or 600?
If you measure it, I measured it yesterday. If you measure it from the front property line that they're showing to the back of the cul-de-sac, the very back of the bulb, it's about 650 feet. Now, when we're talking about that 600-foot threshold, the zoning ordinance doesn't necessarily get into how you measure that 600 feet relative to a cul-de-sac, and is the back of the bulb really the true length of the road, or is it the midpoint of the bulb of the cul-de-sac? That would be part of what the township would have to consider when looking at that 600-foot threshold, and whether or not we're going to take a hard look at requiring secondary access.
So is the primary reason for the 600, would you guess, is to minimize the amount of traffic in and out based on that calculation of 10 per day per lot? Is that what it would be about?
Yeah, the fire department doesn't want a private road to get too long before they have a second way to get in. And in discussions, and I was well before my time, but based on my discussion with the fire marshal, this was a huge consideration by the township 10, 12, 15 years ago of what that number is. Is it 600 feet? Is it 800 feet? And where the fire department and the township settled was 600 feet. But the zoning ordinance does say that there is then some allowance for the township to look at whether there's a reasonable possibility of making that second connection after that 600-foot threshold. And then we would have to ask ourselves, in this situation, does that reasonable availability exist?
So that's for the fire marshal, it's not for traffic volume, that's the fire marshal.
It's the length is, well, yeah, I mean, it's for the fire, it's for emergency responders. There's a threshold for the length, and there's a threshold for the number of lots to be served. In this case, we're not exceeding the threshold of number of lots to be served. We are potentially exceeding the threshold for length.
I think it was a lot more critical before fire hydrants were around.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot more flexible now, I would believe.
And my concern is not so much about that, it's more the safety of the intersection itself, and kind of where the question was prior to me bringing up the 600-foot. I just didn't know if that 600-foot was for the quantity of lots, but it's the fire marshal, really, in that safe passage.
It's a safety measure, yes.
A couple things on that. The International Fire Code, which was last revised, I believe, in 2003, and I believe the number is 32 lots is their recommendation for a secondary access point. Now, as far as safety, for left turn lanes in and what warrants a bypass lane, that's based on the peak hour number of left turn lanes into the development and the traffic counts on M59. For both the AM and PM peak hours. And we did do a model for that. We did submit it to MDOT. They concurred with it. If my recollection serves me right, I think we were assuming 40% were going to the east toward US 23, or I'm sorry, 60% toward US 23 and 40% west toward the city of Howell. And that was our breakdown for that. And with that, we did not meet the warrants for a left turn lane based on the volume on M59 and the peak hour left turn lanes into this development.
Well, the fire marshal would probably be tickled to death if you offered to sprinkle all your houses. You might forget about that 600-foot thing.
So,
Mr. I'm sorry, as a builder, what kind of cost is sprinkling a house add? Do you know off the top of your head?
I can't give you a current cost. Before 05, it was about $4,500 pre-05. And what it is today, and clearly there's a number. The project is very price sensitive. It's not going to be built if there's too much offsite cost. It just happens. Only 18 lots. There's no way to advertise everything we're talking about tonight over 18 months and put a business case together to build these homes. We're tonight to just see if the township is going to entertain some probably unusual variations from the normal PUD. So the problem for us is the recognizable value. Just too small. Other than the connections David's mentioned to the adjacent developments, we don't have a whole lot to offer. It's kind of hard.
I think maybe some, if we're talking recognizable benefits, some energy-efficient design, I think, would go a long way. Sustainable building materials, high R rating on the insulation, low E-glass, things like that. I consider that a recognizable benefit.
That stuff is awesome. We're building in Tyrone Township Hartland schools right now, development in Irish Hills. And we have a very high efficiency home we built there. And another development in Brighton. And that's certainly not only responsible and proper, but we're awesome. It's given the customers it's a high degree of desirability for the homes.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So with you on that.
Benefits everybody.
Yeah, particularly with the cost of heating. We ran some preliminary costs on the ideas that David suggested earlier in our meeting. We've had several meetings with, I think Larry was in a few of the meetings too, here tonight, but we ran some numbers on looping the water main, and when you combine it with sidewalk on both sides of the road and a sidewalk all the way across 59 through that bluff, it starts teetering a little. And then when you combine two and through gets real expensive west of the driveway because of the bluff, and we can't find a reason that water main would ever be used on the west side of the bluff, because there's no more land in the township on that side of the road to be developed. So we run the numbers. We thought, what is the most we can do and have a business model that'll work? And the sidewalks connecting the water main up to the entrance, but not all the way to the west, and connectivity through the common areas in the rear of the property was already kind of pushing the envelope. So we don't, I mean, the idea of looping the water, I mean, that if that's a requirement, we're just going to fold up our tent, and kind of wait and see if maybe another church comes by, or maybe there's we did have interest, I don't know if anybody here heard from the folks that were talking about an assisted living they were considering doing. Now, I only have 18 lots, so if there's a lot of requirements to satisfy the PUD public benefit, then I think my options are limited to either try to rezone where that's not a consideration, or grace from the Planning Commission recognizing it's just not supportable financially to do those off-sites.
Did you look at any multiple family models for this property?
I can't find too many successful financeable projects these days, multifamily. The FHA people are very particular about the requirements for financing, and the market is headed away from attached at a pretty hard pace. In fact, both Pulte and Lombardo have kind of run for the hills on anything that's attached. And the villas of Osceola are selling extremely well, those little detached single-family ranches. They've sold 50 in 5 months, and they're doing very, very well, 10 a month. So that market is really, really strong, but the attached units, interestingly enough, they cannot seem to find buyers for the attached units. And a high-density apartment-type project, that has legs, and that could be done there.
So it's the size of the property and what you'd be able to offer in an attached unit is not desirable, you're saying?
It's I think it would be an efficient design, but it would give us more open space, that we could maybe put a better amenity together. But we can't find a market for the attached stuff. All of the projects that currently exist that were that way in Osceola Township particularly have been re-site planned to make them all detached. So I wouldn't have any interest in trying to pursue that because it just doesn't seem to be financeable. FHA won't finance it.
Not to put words in your mouth, but I think I heard that the to and through may be cost prohibitive on your end.
Well,
can the same be said for looping? What's the price difference between those two?
We can't do either one, David.
Okay.
There's no way to pay for that on 18 lots. It's just impossible. The cost of running through that bluff with that water main is it's estimated close to $60,000. The looping, the 400 feet of looping is another $45,000, and that's over $100,000 in off-sites. And I advertised over 18 lots with the cost of just the basic development puts the per lot cost well beyond where we can find a market. So I'm kind of at a loss. I don't have a lot to offer in the realm of the PUD public benefit arena. Davis, I think the ideas that were proposed, the connectivity on the a trail system between the two projects is a good idea, but if it has to be hard surface and there's wetlands back there, everybody knows what it's going to cost to do that, and that would again kill us. We could probably do another type of surface that isn't so costly in the back and a hard paved sidewalk in the front. But if it all had to be hard paved, that would be pretty difficult to fund. There's a lot of footage between the back connection of the project to the sidewalk and the
So would the to and through requirement be a requirement if this was not a planned development? It was just
Yes, that would be a site plan requirement.
That's what I figured, yeah. So I think that'd be a requirement either way.
Yeah, so the rezoning probably wouldn't even help us on that point. So the only chance I think we have is for maybe the engineer, maybe to take another look at what is the real practical benefit of spending $60,000 to pull that water main all the way to the west property line, where the likelihood of it ever being utilized is remote at best. There's a water main on the north side of M59 already. We're just kind of duplicating the same thing on the south side, and there's nobody to the west to use it. So kind of like, well, I fully would be behind it if there was something here to use the water for, but there doesn't seem to be anything in the township that water main would be used for to the west. We're kind of the last site.
Well, I wouldn't say that that I don't see your point on that one. I mean, I can't imagine San Marino going to municipal water. I mean, they all have wells. I just can't envision that we'd run water main through all that. I guess that's a discussion we have to have with Bob.
I think, I heard David say we could pull the sidewalk in if we could pull it inboard or further away from 59, and I like the idea of making the community more connectable, even if it's not right now. It could be later. And we could, I think we could pull it inboard on the west side of the drive, and then connect it all the way over to the west. We can do that. There's a fair amount of pretty nice white pines on the top of the bluff there, and if we could leave those there, it might be a little more attractive. They're mature and they're in pretty nice shape. We trimmed them, and cleaned them up a little bit, and they look like they're healthy. And if we could run the sidewalk inside of the pines along the bluff, connect, that'd be something I would like to do. And I think we can pay for it.
But by the time it got back out to the west property line of your site, would it still be outside of the public right of way, the way you're envisioning it?
Well, Dave, do you think it would work that way?
If it is, it wouldn't be that much. I mean, you can see, where the sidewalk comes along 59 on Otter Creek there with that, you can see the white. Yes. See, there's where the sidewalk ends right there. So if you kind of project that across, it wouldn't probably have to come maybe 10 foot inside just to clear all those pines and trees there. It wouldn't take very much. And we've got about 30, 40 feet of open space there.
I'm just wondering if by the time you got out here, would you be leaving the township with an obligation of then trying to get an easement to do an extension, because where it stubbed out was 20 feet outside of the public right of way?
Right. Actually, David, I couldn't answer that question right now. I don't know. There's a chance we could always get it back in there, but then would we be leaving San Marino with the same problem? So, and I don't know what they have for open space along M59 there at their entrance, if they would have a similar opportunity to leave that sidewalk back a little bit up to their first drive or not. It certainly looks like they've got some nice trees along there.
Sure.
But that first lot there on the left-hand side of Cloverdale coming in, I don't know how far that lot actually goes out. It looks like by the vegetation plan that they probably do have some open space, or maybe a pond there. I just don't remember.
Is there any sidewalks in San Marino?
No.
Yeah. So if anyone wanted to walk towards 23, they would walk in the road to get to the sidewalk and then walk along 59.
And they already do.
That's the problem.
I'm just asking, I don't, I actually haven't been in there.
I mean, there's a sidewalk along Autumn Woods, and then there's kind of piecemeal from there.
Yeah. Is it connected to the east of Autumn Woods?
Yeah, in front of the bank and the laundromat, but then, you can see, not in front of, this is an office building, this is where that's where the Eagle Express Plaza is. But I know in front of the apartment complex, as we go further, right through here, then they have it all along the Oak Brook Apartments.
So can it be connected in front of those office buildings?
If and when those sites get redeveloped, that would likely be a condition of approval, of picking up those sidewalk connections through there.
So if they just continue to exist as they are, the end of the walking happens right there at them.
Well, say,
All the walking
except
still
as I say, that's a whole plan we're
They
trying
just
to
walk
work
across
on.
the grass?
Yeah, or in the road or something.
So it's actively traveled?
Exactly, yeah.
Is that something the township could, in this plan you talked about earlier, is there funding for connecting these odd little sections where there's no...
That's what we're trying to arrange, yeah.
We have potentially there's going to be a road improvement millage on the November ballot, and one of the conditions of approval of that millage would be the township taking additional monies out of the general fund to start filling in some of these sidewalk gaps. Not necessarily this particular portion here. There's some higher priority areas.
Oh, is it?
But we're trying to fill in those gaps where we can.
I think we could do our part, along there on both sides. I don't know about where the public right-of-way ends, David, how that would work. See, the bluff kind of throws a wild card into it.
Yeah, well, it would make sense to me that if you zoom out a little bit, I mean, so the people in San Marino, or whoever is going to put this in, would have the same challenge you have here. So if this ends up being back in, on your property, and it ends up being on their property, I understand it's a challenge to get an easement. So it's basically, if the people who live in there want connection to the sidewalk system, they either choose to give an easement or not. I got to believe it'd be a lot easier for them to give us an easement than to pay for that, doing the same thing that you like to avoid, cutting into that bluff to put in a sidewalk, because they got the same bluff.
Would it make sense to try to do it at that earlier point that you pointed out, David, to the south a little bit, on the western side of my lot?
We talked about, I think there's a future road extension through here and in San Marino also.
Yeah.
Is that dry ground in there?
This is dry ground, it's wooded, but there's certainly the potential of, to kind of come up here and connect to the sidewalk in there.
Is that desirable for the people in San Marino to walk through that little wooded area if they want to progress on to the east or west, instead of going up to the entrance to the south and doing it, or?
I think it's practical as far as working it through there. I think the problem that you may have is the people that live in these homes and the people that live here probably don't want people funnel in their backyard.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be a challenge.
Right.
Yeah, that's the way a lot of developments are happening, though. Just that's wherever the shortest connection point is, or whatever, that's being connected. People are just having to make do.
Now, there's also, a connection they made right here to this sidewalk. And once you get here, you can get all the way up to 59. They have an outlet here for that, and they have an outlet here for some sort of connection. So, for San Marino, it would make a lot more sense to put something in here to connect into this sidewalk without even going through Mr. Brower's development.
What if we were also to connect on the other side, where we originally talked about with the pumping station? Does that make any sense?
Through this area also?
You think?
Yeah, you could have a T right there to go north from the cursor, and then stub off to go into your property.
Then you're only really walking in the backyard of maybe one house.
Right.
Yeah,
That's fine.
mostly roadway.
Maybe if you push it up to the north as far as possible, the connection point, you can kind of stay away from it.
The only thing that I would say all this talk is fine, but if we're talking about wood chips,
Right.
I'm not really, I don't think we're talking about when we're talking about this sidewalk, we're talking about a hard surface sidewalk that people are going to ride bikes on, and there's not a yearly replenishment of, wood chip. If we're talking about wood chip here and wood chip over here, who's adding wood chips to that all the time? Because it has to be done. And
Well, the front hard surface, I think, is fine, Larry. This whole thing to the south is really, we're trying to find some way to meet the requirements of the PUD. I really don't think either one is going to get any traffic, no matter what we make it out of. So I'm just trying to figure.
Yeah, and I'm there with you. I think this is a community benefit.
Yeah.
As Jeff said, energy efficiency of the house design is a community benefit. I don't know how much,
Yeah. And I really think some of that...
that'd be a great community benefit if it was hard surface, in my opinion, but if it's wood chips, who's maintaining it?
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised how much that would get used, because like Dave was saying, right now, all the gaps in the sidewalks along there right now that's a problem, because people are walking. And the only way to walk is to get up to 59 and then walk along 59. If there was ways to walk between the neighborhoods, like we were just talking about, I think you'd be surprised how often it is used. People are very mobile these days, and they don't want to drive.
Yeah, the problem with this one is, I mean, it's not on his property at all.
Yeah, exactly, that's right.
Yeah, that one I don't think I
That
know
would
much
be
about.
nice if it worked.
The other one, I guess we could explore that. Do you think we should explore that, Larry? Look at the topography, see if it's wetland, see if it's feasible to put a hard surface between there?
Where's that?
Right from the pumping station on up north and then west enter to our site. Yeah. Should we explore that?
I mean, you could, I mean,
I know it drops off at the back of the topo. David has a topo, I think. I know it drops off back here. I don't know if that's, if it's wetland, it's probably DOA, but if it's not, maybe that could be done.
I mean, the thing that I see is that, you know, if I'm living in one of these houses and I want to ride my bike, am I just going to ride back into here? I mean, so, I mean, and I'm not saying you're just saying that. I'm just saying, I don't know what this, if we're lumping this as a community benefit, I mean, in my opinion, I'm just speaking for myself, and I'm not, you know, I'm not the connectivity expert, you know. I just think I would use this to go down here to, you know, the shopping centers and stuff like that, more than I would use this to just bike around this establishment.
Well, I think you're posing two different questions there. If I was out biking for exercise, I'd go over to the next development and ride around their streets and avoid M59. If I wanted to go to the store, it's a different approach. I mean, I myself would try to avoid M59 at all costs. I have no desire to ride along it unless I need to go to the store. So,
No, I live over in here. And I remember a few years back, my kids were over here, you know, during the summer hanging out with some friends, and they wanted to go over to this party store that's over here. You know, so they come up here, and they can walk a little bit of way, but then they can't complete their whole walk on a sidewalk. I mean, I think, and I see kids walking along here, you know, so, I mean, yeah, I mean, kids traverse M59 to get, you know, to the school site, to these places here, to Target, they walk along M59, and I think a sidewalk along M59 is much better than walking on the shoulder of M59.
Probably the easiest solution. Yeah. What about the densities? Does anybody have a problem with densities or the setbacks? I know they're, you said it's comparable to the neighboring developments, but it's maybe less than what we would require in a PD.
Well, the PD has some baseline standards that, in lieu of a design guideline that says, in lieu of a design plan that says otherwise, the baseline side yard setback requirement is 15 feet or a total of 30 feet. Now, if they presented some designs of some potential houses that gave us the indication that 10 feet on either side is more appropriate, then just like as the township did in Autumn Woods years ago, the township could allow that lesser setback. And again, I think the site plan really mimics what we have in Autumn Woods: lot size, frontage, building envelope size. setbacks. So the township would have the ability to allow that lesser setback if they felt that the design of the homes was warranted it.
So that same setback as in Autumn Woods is 20 feet?
10 feet on each lot, so a total of 20 when you... Do you know what size, what sort of houses do you envision on these, square footage wise, side entry, are they going to be comparable houses to what we see in Autumn Woods?
Yes.
Size, design, building materials?
Building the houses that we probably the square footage is about 2,500 total. Either ranch or just starting closer to the 900 ranches now. This is the colonial and Irish shows that we have here. This house is for sale for $4,000.
Because why? Okay.
The ranches are they require a little more. So the 80-foot lots will work. And for most of those sites that have walkout opportunities, we build every house with a finished walkout. And we use superior wall foundation systems, which are pre-insulated, stronger than pole walls. Pretty expensive. It costs about $5,000. They're not 13 right out of the ground. They're built in Grand Rapids and part of the truck. We started pre-chased. We finished the lower levels there. They just screwed the drywall to the side. So they have a very high energy rating.
So that square footage is without the basement?
Without the basement. Well, ranches that we're building are about 2,070 square feet. The lower levels finished sections are 1,400. So there's about 3,600 total finish. These lots aren't all walkouts. There's about 40%. 40% of them are walkouts. So in any case, they would all be built in secure wall foundation systems. That's something I could possibly bring forward if we decided to go ahead with this. Avoid that discussion of energy aspects of what we could do there. Use 2x6 friendly. We do a lot of high energy efficiency over time.
Any thoughts on price points? I mean, I know that your answer might be it depends on what we would make you do, but...
Well, regardless of what you might require, there's a ceiling to the
Sure.
market. And I'm finding that ceiling to be about $350. I do get phone calls from clients, actually folks that who ask who's available, when will be ready, that kind of thing. What they're telling me is that some of their homes are getting a little longer to choose. Floor plans are a little compartmentalized, kind of chopped up, and be ready to downsize. So we're not thinking of building a mansion. Things we were building 20 years ago, it's not kind of where it's headed. More smaller, single-story, low maintenance, high efficiency sort of folks. So I've got a 350-pin ceiling on a pricing model, and I think we could do well with sales pace. Absorption probably 2 year build out, about 8 or 9 years. The ranches, I could bring a plan. We already have these side-loaded garages, side-loaded 3-car garages with maintenance for the exteriors. Finishing office. Grandkids go upstairs for the holidays and meet floors.
What kind of exteriors, siding materials and such?
Well, it's very vinyl with stone accents. Front elevations of over 50% of brick stone. We generally hold the stone with brick going under the sills of the side elevations as well. And then the garages are side entry on the outgoing side of the road. So if you're driving in, the garages on the right will all be have a view. Garages on the left, they all face the back, they all face the cul-de-sac. So driving in, you'll see the front elevations. You do side entry on an 80-foot lot? We can do it, yeah. We're doing it in Irish Hills, which is a Boston Road, the whole 23 there, the whole sub where Red Ward has his little trailer sales company. You could take a drive through there. Those are the homes that, the ranches in particular.
The homes in Autumn Woods are 80-foot lots with side entry.
They're all side entry in Autumn Woods?
I won't say every single one of them, but all the ones that I can picture are.
Where was that development that you were referring to?
It's just between Center Road and Foster, on the west side of 23, where it used to be a horse auction, trailer sales.
Yep, got it. Oh, yeah, I got it now.
Oh, yeah.
Right in there.
Autumn Woods.
Driving, we can't discard stuff. We have, we're setting homes under construction. The ranches and the ones at the same site.
So the dam was not.
I had this great homes last weekend, this house.
I bet that one's not.
I had another company with great homes right on Toby Drive by Portugal Church. And I had 3 times as many visitors to the right home as I did Taiwan Township. And none of the people that saw us only in Taiwan Township were interested in this. It just said, everything was nice, and we went all the way to the The cost of it, just to give you a little on a $350,000 bill, all of the homes in Irish Hills that I bought the lots in 2011, to the tax, the state tax, all the lots in there, there's a fully approved seller, they have the roads, water, sewer. They pay $500 a piece for lots. So we're building out the homes, and our construction cost on those homes is averaging about $250,000. So I'm selling the 329 and sales costs are about 10% for commissions and closing costs are insurance. So I net about $300. It costs me about $250. So I have about $50,000 per house margin. That's the basis of a lot of I'm trying to figure out, how much can you really spend on developing new infrastructure, road, water, sewer, sidewalks, landscaping, all the second, touching bases, water, permits. How much of that could be spent on lot per lot at the end of the day, and build a house and raise the soil? That's where I'm coming from on all the discussion is if I could get the lots built for about $45,000 per lot, I would have, instead of $250, I would be $275, conceivably, if they still sold to $330 and then another $300, it gives us about $30,000 margin. Maybe we could raise the price to $350 at that point, because we just got allocation and we could go over better than Taiwan, and it's a system. So, this is just kind of new, everybody's still kind of coming out of the closet. So, I'm a little afraid of it. 25 high goals, if I could build these lots for $25,000 per lot, or cost involved. Not a certain quality. That's why I thought it was worth it, do a concept and just use I just don't want to go too far and find out a trade. Still looking at rooms for 5 to 10
So is it fair to say the big ticket items that we talk about in this letter that would probably push you past that $25K per lot, development cost is lubing the water main, the to and through concept on bringing the water main all the way to the west property line? And those are the two big ones?
Those are the two ones that,
And maybe part of the sidewalk discussion?
nails in this definitely, let's see, if those were requirements, and I don't know if it's all we would not, we would require to do the water, and push the water main to the west of the block. Just a home builder, I don't know assisted living facilities or churches. I would build homes on it. I can do that, feel safe, cost, and
Probably the other thing on that would be some of that, and also
Probably much more than extending a water main.
that's why the first meeting was on that. They didn't give us that line that said that they would require the bypass. If there wasn't, like if they said they would require a car, then we would be saying that's $200,000.
Sure.
Over 18 months, I mean, if we had 100 unit, kind of somehow, real dense, multi-10 rows of Osceola on 50-foot lots and shotgun stuff, maybe set your area up in here, maybe you can advertise it out. I don't know if it's very desperate, but pretty expensive, I think. I thought it was 20 RVUs, but then kind of wrapping it down. It was more RVUs than we used.
Maybe I could ask the planning commission, does the planning commission feel that meeting density and lot size and lot configuration consistent with Autumn Woods, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
What we haven't talked about is the open space and the kind of 25% base requirement. Does the open space that's being proposed, does that seem reasonable? Because if that needs to be increased, then that has the potential to take away buildable lots, and which again I think is not something that the applicant can afford, and not that should be our deciding point, but it's worth discussing that or any other improvements that may push a lot or two off of this concept plan.
Well, I guess I can give you my opinion on this, is I think this lot should be developed residentially rather than, a commercial use or assisted living or something like that. And the only way that's going to happen, whether it's Mr. Grono or somebody else, we're going to be looking at something like this because it's 9 acres of land. I mean, how much can we say you can't develop of it and still be able to have a feasible project? So I myself, I'm not concerned with the layout that he's shown us as far as open space. I do like that they track, they've done what they could to pull it away from San Marino, that's the larger lots. I think that's the right way to go about it. So I'm not I'm not losing sleep over the open space on it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. In a perfect world, yeah, it would be great to have the kind of cluster developments that, we look for in new development, open space, walkability and all that, but this is, like you said, it's a tiny little lot, so it's hard to do what you need to do and make it successful.
And I agree as well, but I would like to see if you can explore connecting in some way to your neighbors. I think then again we would see a benefit there. You're landlocked, you're tight, but just that little perk would say, hey, and that becomes more usable.
So when you say connect, you mean with pathway, not a road?
Sidewalk up front on M59 for sure, but then as we were describing other connections, like a pathway, not a hard surface, I think would provide some benefit as well.
So potentially the next step would be to have the same kind of discussion at the township board level. If we do take that step, I think prior to getting there, we need to have a whole, another discussion about these big ticket items that we keep coming back to. Looping the water main, the to and through. And whether that's a discussion with you guys and with the engineer, with the DPW director, or some combination thereof. But I think, if that's, what I'm hearing is that's a deal killer. And, not to say that anybody's giving anybody an ultimatum, it's just, it is what it is.
I would like to do this project, but I've had my head handed to me. I know I can't absorb the cost.
Sure. And I think what...
I have no reason, other than I can't finish.
So I think what the township board, or if we wanted to bring this back to the planning commission, would benefit from is a better discussion from an engineering and then from a water service standpoint of how hard do we as a township need to push for that. I'll certainly get back to yeah, probably, and I want to start with a discussion with, again, DPW director, engineer, and maybe it's another meeting with just that group and with you and Mr. LeClaire, and then
We'd certainly like
come back to either come back to the planning commission if the planning commission wants to go that route, or send it to the township board and have a better discussion at that level about these infrastructure costs, because that seems to me to be kind of a deciding point.
I'd love to have those conversations again with your engineer, and we kind of had them once in our meeting already. The unfortunate thing about this property is it is landlocked. It would have been nice when Autumn Woods was done if there would have been a road stub to it. We wouldn't be talking about the work out on 59. It would have been nice when Autumn Woods was done if there was water main stub to the property. There's not. So now, the unfortunate circumstance is to do that, we would have to go off-site to grab those at a pretty good expense. And there's really no place to put a road. There was no stub left for this property, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And I would have thought that if it was important enough for water main to be looped through there would have been a main left at our property line. There was not. There was a stub left to San Marino in case it ever needed to extend to the west through San Marino. I doubt that will ever happen, but there is a stub for them. There is nothing for this property. There's been no sewer stub to this property. There's a pump station close by. There's no access to it. We're bringing sewer down from 59. We're going to service as much as we can by gravity. The last few lots are going to be serviced by a low-pressure force main. So already we're being required to kind of work everything on our own without any help from the rest of Autumn Woods, which would have been really nice if some of those considerations would have been made at that time, but we are where we are.
Where are you going to bring water from?
Water's coming from M59.
Well, where at on 50?
The water is extended to our east property line, and we're planning to extend it up to our entrance and down our entrance.
So there is water to, I mean, you said there's no water to your
Well,
site.
there's no water around, because
What they're talking about essentially is,
You're saying where they want-
Connect down to here. Well, that's 400 feet off-site plus another 100 feet on-site.
So when you say it would have been nice, are you saying through into here somehow?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify, because there is water main stubbed at the road at your east property. Okay.
Right. But if it was, if it was so important for the township system to have some more redundancy built into it, it would have been nice if there would have been a stub left at our property line to complete that loop. We're required to, come in from 59 regardless. But yeah, we'd love to have those conversations with the township engineer.
Well, I don't know how the commission feels, and I don't know that I'm the right one to speak since I'm on the board as well, but I mean, it would seem to make sense to me if they have the discussion with yourself and the engineers on what the need is from that it's going to have to come back. I mean, if it goes through the board, if it makes sense to them, the commission's going to see it again in the preliminary stage. I hate to hold them up to come back here to do more conceptual stuff after that discussion when they got to go conceptual to the board anyways. But like I say, I'm on that body, so I feel a little,
Well, I mean, the decision to make this a requirement, to and through or looping, is going to be at your level anyway, right? So I think that's probably the logical next step. Have those discussions, and then take it to the township board if it can't be remedied, because that's going to be outside of our realm, the requirement.
And I will wonder if a fair question will be, if not the to and through requirement that we would require plan development or not, what might you offer in lieu of that? I could see that being a question. I'm not necessarily looking for you to answer it here tonight. I could see that being a fair question. So if it sounds like the desire of the planning commission would be to see this proceed to the township board to have these more policy level discussions, such as to and through, and certainly provide for them the comments that the planning commission has here tonight. And if the board feels this is a concept plan that can proceed, then we'll see this group back here soon enough with a preliminary site plan.
I think that'd be appropriate, because then you can make your decision at that point, whether or not you want to go forward.
Is there anything you aren't hearing tonight that you still would want some clarification, answers on?
You've been more than kind to give your thoughts, and I appreciate it. I think,
Do we want to have that meeting separately by everyone on the board?
I would think so, and, certainly probably some emails, some phone calls in between, too. But, yes, I think we want to go to the township board with a concept plan with a more concrete discussion of what are and are not the benefits of enforcing the to and through concept, the looping concept. Well, let me look at my calendar. We're not looking to hold anybody up, but let me look at my calendar. We're getting into vacation season a little bit. Can I get back to you on that one? As soon as we reasonably can. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, just a little consideration to do if we do anywhere with this, then what's the construction season? Because we don't start. If that, so is this month? Next month is it?
There's 2 township board meetings every month.
Back here, back to the board, is that?
No, just to the board.
I mean, it's hard for me to think that you're going to be starting construction this season, because you've got 5 more meetings after this one.
Yeah, I think
This
that's-
is what we're not looking for any formal action. This is what a concept plan review is just,
very helpful, and I really appreciate it. The only thing I think, it has been traditional that the Planning Commission has acknowledged that the applicant has completed the conceptual portion at the Planning Commission level if they are inclined to do so.
So then by consensus, we all feel that they've completed this stage, the conceptual stage,
Yes.
Yes.
at our level anyway. Okay, thank you. Sure. Put it into the record. Thank you for that. Thank you. Perfect, thanks.
One of you can move to Tyrone Township, though. Can't afford to lose time.
All right, yeah, take care.
HRC, your DPW guy. Next week, maybe possible if it works on anybody's schedule.
thank you.
Tell me again, Tyrone Township, it's right there, Old 23 in Fawcett, and then you got Center Road, and it's halfway into the on the west side. There's a road called Donegal Court, and another road called Wicklow. And we have homes and all in those quarters. Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll move on. Item number 9 is
just about
to the public,
exactly
and I
right,
don't
yeah.
see any.
The ranches, there's this colonial that I gave Jeff. That's one I filled it together. But if there's 4 or 5 ranches in there, those are the type of thing we like to do.
Okay, so we're on to the planner's report, so Dave, got anything for us tonight?
Just a few quick things. I'm on vacation when we're done, so I'm going to rush. So we did agree on a planning consultant for our new 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We received 7 proposals for our Parks and Rec plan, and we interviewed 2 of the firms that submitted proposals, and our old planning consultant, McKenna, was chosen by our interview committee as the firm that's going to do our Parks and Recreation Master Plan. They did do our 2008 to 2012 Master Plan, so there is something to be said for a familiarity there, and being able to perhaps recycle some of the content, so that was part of the decision. That contract is going to go before the board on July 1st, and then we're going to start on that work shortly thereafter.
Is there going to be input from Planning Commission required there?
Yes, there will be, and there will need to be a public hearing. That's a requirement, state requirement for Parks and Rec plan.
Can I just jump in there for a second? So they're planning on using a task force methodology again. I know we had people on the Roads and Pathway Task Force from this body, so I think probably would be looking to duplicate that kind of involvement again.
So we may be looking for volunteers here shortly for our first kickoff meeting. We continue to have discussions with the folks from Speedway and their engineering consultant about their plans to tear down and rebuild their, and in so doing expand their gas station. We have a meeting, not this coming week, but the week after, on June 8th, to discuss their site plan elements, because the hope is that by then their traffic study will be completed, and then we'll have a better sense of what the traffic volumes in and out are going to be, and how those implicate access on the M59 and onto Old 23. And once we have a better handle on what that looks like, then we can talk more about what the internal layout is going to look like. So, meeting on June 8th, if any planning commissions are inclined to attend, it's at 4:30 in the afternoon. Larry's going to be on vacation, so you could take his spot. The Planning Commission will have a meeting on July 10th. I'd like to get those agenda packets emailed to you shortly before I call myself on vacation. What we're going to be looking at is a new building on the Stone Pro site, which is the stone dealer on Old 23 East side, down by the self-storage facility. They want to put in a new 5,000 square foot storage building, so we'll be looking at that at the July 10th meeting. As I mentioned, we'll also have the May 8th Planning Commission minutes for approval then. The Ordinance Review Committee continues to meet. We hope to meet on July 10th prior to our full Planning Commission meeting. We're in pretty good shape on the temporary portable signs within the village district. We're pretty good on the home occupation signs. We're going to have some recommendations for the Ordinance Review Committee on donor recognition signs at the July 10th meeting. And then we're going to continue to do some homework on the agritourism signs, because there's another thing that's in play with that one is the Right to Farm Act, and we want to make sure that nothing we do somehow conflicts with that state law. The whole idea with all the sign amendments is to get them to this Planning Commission by the end of August to set a public hearing. So we're still on schedule there, I hope. There's some other gas stations. Apparently the word has gotten out that Hartland Township is underserved on fueling stations, so now we've got a few of them that are in play, so more to come on that. At least one of them is asking me to keep things confidential. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be out next week. I may have to, at some point in there, come in and send out the Planning Commission packets for the meeting on the 10th. I'm still waiting for at least one thing from one of the applicants before I can do that, so we'll have a meeting on the 10th. And an ORC meeting prior. I'm looking at my ORC. That's all I have.
Okay, so next on the agenda is committee reports. Do we have anything today?
I would just like to mention a couple things. So, we had 2 site plans tonight, and going back to the animal clinic where I brought this up again, there's a requirement in our ordinance that they show us their plan superimposed on an image like this. And I hate to see one of these people get tabled because we aren't requiring them before they get this far to give us that. So that's as gentle a reminder as I'm willing to give. The other thing is that this tonight again was the second applicant who came without a dumpster enclosure on their plans. That's something that they're supposed to have on their plans. It's not something that's supposed to come at construction drawings. So, I mean, we got to start telling people that they need to provide those things to us, or they're going to have to wait till the next meeting. I hope we're not holding people up with that. We just need to let them know that they need to get it to us as soon as it gets in our hands so that we have it. So, that's it from me.
Anybody else? So then looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support?
Motion and support. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.